Welcome everyone to the Sunlight of the Spirit meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. My name is Lindsay and I'm an addict. It's no accident that we're kicking off this 12-week speaker series exactly 12 weeks in advance of the first inaugural CA conference in Belgium. Over the next several weeks, you can expect to hear from a different speaker each week, share on their experience on one of the 12 steps. That's right, 12 weeks, 12 speakers, 12 steps. We're very excited to have you all here today as we prepare our minds and spirits for what is certainly going to be a memorable and historical event, the Sunlight of the Spirit Conference, Belgium's first ever. Today we've invited Vicky from the UK to share a message of depth and weight for the next 40 to 55 minutes. Vicky, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Wow, 40, what was the time?
Like 40
that's a long time.
40 to 50.
It's a real honour and a privilege to have been invited to share here today. And I was sitting down just before coming on for the kind of 45 minutes before I came on line to try and centre myself and calm myself down. I really struggle being confined to one step. And I sat to calm myself down. I sat and got the 12 and 12 out and read through the step 5. And I've done a few step 5s in the time that I've been in recovery. My clean time, my sobriety date is the 10th of December 2002, and I'm so surprised that this has worked for me. I came into first kind of had my first brush with recovery in 1999. I went for a treatment centre in the UK. They were throwing a lot of money around at funding for people to go into treatment. And I was lucky enough to have 6 months of residential treatment in the UK. And I didn't really have a full understanding of what was wrong with me. I went into the treatment centre and I thought my main problem was heroin. And if I could just leave that alone, everything would be okay. I thought, I could probably still drink and still smoke. And the treatment centre was a treatment centre that we had to go to at least 3 12-step meetings a week. And I went to all different fellowships. I went to AA, I went to NA, and I went to CA while I was in there. And CA at the time in Bournemouth, which is where I've recovered, was just, I don't think anyone was actually working the steps. It was very, very new in the UK and it was pretty chaotic. And I found it quite intimidating, if I'm honest. But when I left the treatment centre, I got a sponsor and I worked through the first 5 steps, and I felt that the rest of the steps didn't really apply to me. I hadn't done a lot of things that were mentioned in the room, so I was one of those that listened to the differences, and I was very good at separating myself from everyone else. And as a result of that, I can remember the lady who's sponsoring me today, I can remember saying to her, I don't think I'm actually an addict. I think I just got addicted. And she just looked at me like I was insane. Anyway, that thinking and only working steps 1 to 5 took me back out the door again. So my experience of recovery has been relapse. And with that relapse, I understood then what the obsession meant and what powerlessness meant. I really believed, because my relapse started as drinking here and there, I believed that I was in control. And it talks about that in the big book, about stepping up to the nearest bar room. And And it was slow. You know, it was a few months before I went back to my drug of choice and crack cocaine. So my using progressed in that relapse. I'd had a child in that time. You know, it suggested not to get involved in relationships in early recovery, and obviously I didn't do anything that was suggested, otherwise I wouldn't have used again. But yeah, I had a child, and my daughter was 2 when I came back into recovery, my oldest daughter. And it was absolute chaos. My using got a lot worse. You know, I was selling heroin and crack out of the hood of a pushchair. I had social services, which is, you know, welfare for children involved in my life. And I was very lucky not to lose her. I was supported in getting back into recovery. And I did a detox at the time. We had a local detox, and by the time I came back into recovery, I was done. You know, I wasn't a good parent. My using came above everything else. And, you know, and I knew I had no idea how to recover. And I knew that I was the real deal. I was the addict that they talk about in the big book. You know, I have absolutely no control over when I'm going to stop or if I'm going to start again. And I knew I'd heard enough by going to meetings to know that I had to work the 12 steps. And what my relapse gave me was something inside me snapped. You know, it absolutely broke me, my relapse, and I had to hold my hands up. And thankfully, that surrender has continued for just over 23 years. But I absolutely believe that surrender has continued for that length of time because I've been consistent in the actions that are outlined in the steps. I've always been sponsored. That's been key for me. And that is actually key, you know, a key component of step 5. You know, steps 1 to 5 didn't work for me. It wasn't enough. And I was as honest as I could be in that step 4 I did. But on reflection, there was plenty that I'd left out. I didn't. I heard shares where people were sharing certain parts of their step 4s in meetings, and I just thought, I'm not doing that. If that's what I've got to do to recover, I'm not doing that. Thankfully, I got back and found out that wasn't the case. I did not need to divulge everything about myself in a meeting. And my step 4 this time round, my first step 4 was so thorough that I even put in there that my husband, he's my ex-husband now, squeezing the toothpaste from the tube in the middle was one of my resentments. And when I wrote it down, I just thought that's just so ridiculous. But I was absolutely terrified of using again when I came back in. And I put absolutely everything down that I could think of on that step 4, everything that came to my mind. And then sharing step 5, you know, there was some shameful stuff on my step 4. And I had fear going through the steps when I first came back in. And that sharing that step 5 with someone else, I was scared. I was scared that stuff was going to come out that I didn't want coming out to other people in the rooms. But I was more scared of going back to where I came from. You know, I was scurrying around on the streets. I was putting myself and my child in dangerous situations. You know, once crack was involved in my life, my using took on a different different personality, if you like. You know, I can remember I was selling crack, and I can remember getting a knife out, and I'm not like that. I can remember someone coming to my door and I was threatening him with a knife, and I had absolutely no intention of using it. And I can remember a thought coming into my head: what am I doing? What have I turned into? Feel like I'm jumping around a bit. But it was just so much chaos. So this first step 5 that I did, I put everything down and I took that risk and shared absolutely everything that I could think of and everything that was on my step 4. I didn't hold anything back because I didn't want to die, and I certainly didn't want to die slowly, which is what seemed to be happening in active addiction. And when I shared that the step 5 after my relapse, the first step 5 I did, I felt like a lot of weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but I don't recall feeling that real connection with God at that time. It was all just blind faith. And it was certainly blind faith this first time from my relapse going through the steps. And yeah, sharing that step 5. This step 5 on coming back from the relapse, I don't recall how I felt, particularly after doing that. I didn't feel like a weight had been lifted. I just knew that I'd been as thorough and as honest as I could be at that time. And I can remember afterwards, for months afterwards, I'd be in a meeting and someone would share something and I'd think, oh my God, I didn't share that and I didn't write it down. You know, my memory got triggered as time went on, and is there someone else speaking? Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Yeah, I shared, I would phone my sponsor and say, I left this off. And I continued working through the rest of the steps. And inventory, that step 4, step 5 process, inventory has continued to be really important in my recovery, because I can't stay clean and sober. You know, some of the most profound step 5s I've done have been done in recovery. You know, I can the guilt, the shame, the remorse, when I'm using, I've kind of got that while I was using. I didn't really understand what my addiction was doing. And I'm going to behave defectively when I'm taking alcohol or drugs into my system. And I'm going to rob, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to lie, I'm going to steal, and I'm going to ruin relationships, either my own or other people's. But I can be pretty defective, I guess, in recovery as well. You know, I have to keep on top of that stuff. And I was one of these people that said, you know, in the beginning, you only need to go through the steps once. You just need to continue in 10, 11 and 12. And I've got to a point in my recovery where I think I was 10 years in and I was struggling again. And I work hard at my recovery. I take recovery really, really seriously. It's my priority. It's come first from the day I got back in, from the 10th of December 2002. I have been diligent in what I do here. And I've seen that it's the diligence that keeps people clean and sober. It's the people that are consistent in action that stay in recovery. I've done that. that's what I've done, and that's why I'm still here. But my second step 5 I did when I was probably about 15 years clean, and I'd got to a place where I was really depressed, really down, and I was still taking inventory, and I was still praying, and I was still sponsoring people. I've never been a person that's, I've got stuff going on, I can't sponsor people. The people that I've sponsored when I've got stuff going on have absolutely saved my life. But the second step 4 was more about how I'd conducted myself in recovery, particularly in the home. I am the kind of person who needs to be in control. Everything needs to be okay in my life, and then I'm okay. So I was micromanaging at home. I hit this point where I was really depressed, really low, and I didn't know what was going on because I was doing my stuff. And I heard this share at a convention, and I have to say it was a convention that I didn't want to go to. I'd got really defective, really arrogant, and people with a few years really enthusiastic and sharing that where they were at. And I used to think to myself, yeah, come and tell me that when you're 10 years in, when you're 15 years in. I was struggling. And this lady from the States shared, and it blew my mind. I knew I was in trouble. I had stuff going on at home. My ex-husband was drinking again. My kids were smoking weed upstairs. And I'd kind of been floating around in this 3 months of thinking, maybe I've been around long enough. Maybe I could just go and have a bong with my kids. I couldn't think of anything worse. I stopped smoking weed a long time before I stopped anything else because it made me paranoid. But this woman shared, and I knew I was in trouble. And that was with, doing some stuff, taking inventory regularly. What I probably wasn't doing was sharing where I was at with the sponsor that I had at the time. And it talks about that in the 12 and 12 about, it being really important to share with another person. It isn't just about me going to God with, my interpretation of God. It isn't, me and God can't do this alone. I need to have someone I can go to because my thinking can twist up still. And that's what I was doing. It was just, I was writing my inventory. I wasn't sharing with the sponsor I had at the time. I hadn't fallen out with, but it was definitely I was finding it difficult, to be honest. And this lady shared, and I, like I said, I knew I was in trouble. And I went to the sponsor that I've got today and said, this is what's going on. I'd spent a few months obsessing about how I could get away with smoking some weed. I was working in drug and alcohol services. Weed isn't legal in the UK. So it was just 3 months of full-on obsession. And I think I must have been doing just enough not to pick up. And my ears were open enough. And I did a step 4 and 5 with this lady. And, I had to look at how I was behaving at home. My kids were just walking around. Everyone was walking around on eggshells and had been for a long time because of my need to have my world perfect. So I'd got pretty twisted up at 15 years in, and I'm so grateful to this fellowship for the people in it and for being open enough to the message when I need to hear it, because it's not fun skidding along, just being clean. It's not enough for me. It is not enough for me to just be clean. And that step 4 really opened my eyes to how my life, clean and sober, can still affect others. And the shame was worse because I was 15 years in, and you know, I can hand on heart say clean time does mean something, but if you're 15 years in and you're dying inside, you're in trouble. That's not okay, and you're treating people around you badly. That isn't okay. That isn't what being clean's about. You know, being clean is not enough. Hanging on by my fingernails is not enough. Not for me anyway. It might be for other people, and that's cool. But I know what I need to do. So I had to have a good look at myself. And I was really ashamed of how I was treating my family. You know, because behind closed doors is easy, isn't it, to go to a meeting, talk the talk, look like you're doing really well. Oh, look at me, I'm 15 years clean. Didn't mean anything. Did not mean anything at that point in time. Because I was so defective. And I shared that with my sponsor. Everything I shared with my sponsor. I've had another experience. I went through the steps again, having had another spiritual awakening. I was wrong. I do need to keep going through these steps periodically. I do need to keep being honest. It wasn't enough for me to sustain me for a lifetime going through the steps once. You know, I have to have someone in my life that I can be honest with, and to do that step work with. And what you know, I was reading in the 12 and 12, and it says we don't have to share our inventory with a sponsor. You know, we can share it with a clergyman. It also says we can share it with a doctor. Oh, I don't know about anyone else, but my doctor only gives me 10 minutes, max. So that wasn't one for me. But it's good to know that we don't have to share with someone in these rooms, because my biggest fear around my step 5 was it getting out on what a horrible, horrible person I can be, particularly in my using. I don't want people knowing my conduct. I don't want people knowing that I've been part of street robberies, or, you know, people don't need to know that in the rooms. You know, I don't want people knowing my shameful story. I care less now than I did back then. And my experience of hearing step 5s was, once I started sponsoring, I'm just a person that is in that room with the other person who hears it. I don't keep it. I don't remember the step 5s that I've heard. And I'm sure the step 5s that my sponsors had. They don't, for me, it goes. God takes it. And I'm just that person to be there that's closed-mouthed, like my sponsor. Nothing that I've shared has come back to me from anyone else. In the 23 and a bit years that I've been around, nothing's come back. And I can remember having a sponsee that was really upset with me when we got to steps 8 and 9, and she was talking about this person that she'd had to make amends to. And she was upset that I hadn't remembered what was on her step 5. And my answer to that is, I've got enough of my own gear going on in my head. I can't be carrying around anyone else's. And I think that was the beautiful thing, to be able to take someone through the steps and realise that I don't carry, if that's my recovery is for me to carry and for me to deal with. It's not anyone else's responsibility, it's mine. And that's a blessing. My part here now in these rooms is to be available to take other people through the steps and to let them know, the fear that was being bandied around when I first came into recovery. Oh, step 4. Oh, it's terrible. It's really awful process to go through. Do you know what? When I was doing the resentments, the first one back from my relapse, I felt resentful. I was picking up resentments left, right and centre. I was wide open to it. And I'm quite quick to pick resentments up. And when I was in the fear, I was full of fear. And when I was in the conduct, I was full of shame. But it wasn't nearly as painful as not doing it and getting that stuff written down and shared with someone else. And I've not ever heard a step 5 that I haven't done the same things. It's just not come into my path, And we're so blessed to have this process to go through and to be free from what active addiction brings us. Not once in the 23 years, I've had some tough times in my recovery. I've had to deal with all sorts of things come up. We're not promised here that we'll be skipping through the daisies for the rest of our lives. It's not going to be, life shows up. And what the steps have given me, and to continue going through the steps have given me, is the ability to deal with life. Because without this program, I'm either going to go insane, and I'll go insane enough to pick up again, for that to become a good idea again, or, I'll take my own life. They're my truths. They're my kind of things that have come up for me along the journey. I know the drugs don't work for me anymore. And I was so pissed off that was the case, because I loved what they did for me. I did have good times. I had great times when I was out there using. I liked going partying. I loved the festival scene. I loved the squat parties. I loved it all until it stopped working. And I'm so grateful now that there is a way that I can still go and do the things that I enjoyed doing, clean and sober. And that's as a result of what we do here. It's just incredible what this program's given me. When I first came in, I thought, I've got to get to that year. I've got to get to that year, because I kept slipping. And someone said to me, in fact, it was my ex-husband who was using at the time, said, you've got to plan through, not to. And here I am. It just blows my mind that I'm still here, and that these steps have continued to work, that I continue to change, that I continue to wake up. It hasn't been a boring journey. And, I can, like I said, I can go and do those things that I used to like doing. I'm part of the festivals committee in the UK. And I can still go. I'm going to a festival next week to do service. And my highlight of doing that service is seeing young people, like real young. I wouldn't have even considered coming in to recovery in my 20s. If you told me I had a problem, you wouldn't be in my life anymore. And I see young people coming in and they're grabbing this stuff and they're lighting up. And that's what I've been shown in this fellowship, how to light up. And step 5 has been the absolute key. I had to share the past. And I have to keep looking at where I'm at in my recovery, because it's too easy, isn't it? I've seen so many people go over the years, and every single one of them has stopped being honest. They've stopped taking the actions. They've stopped the prayer. They've stopped the meditation, and they've started to run their own lives again. And it's really easy to get to that place where, I've got a few years. Maybe I can get away with it now. And maybe some people can. I haven't met any, or they go and they're just not in my kind of world anymore, or they come back and not one person has come back from a relapse that I know that said, oh yeah, I was still doing all my stuff. We for me, I start to think I'm in control again. I don't need this. I'm clean enough now to not have to come here and carry a message. And it's absolute bullshit. I've got today, and I got up this morning, I did my prayers, I've done readings throughout the day, and I've connected with people in recovery. And that's how my day is every day. It's so, so simple. The only thing that gets in my way is my mind. And that first mind clearing was in step 5, of seeing the truth in step 4. I was such a victim. Oh, if they hadn't done that to me, if he hadn't treated me like that, if my mum, my dad, my stepmom hadn't done this, that and the other, if your mum had died when you were 11, you'd use too. It's not true. There are people out there that have had far, far worse things happen to them than I have. And they don't drink and use. They might write a book. They were all just excuses. And I was as much of an instigator in my problems as I was a victim of my problems. And, I've been given a way to live that's worked day in, day out, year in, year out. And that, when I sit and I think about it and I share, absolutely blows my mind. And the people, the women in my life that have carried me through. I hated women when I came here. I didn't trust women when I came here. I thought I only trusted men, but actually the truth was I could manipulate men a lot easier than I could women. And I've got some amazing women in my life today that I just wouldn't have recovered without, that I trust. And I just didn't have that when I got here. And that was from a young age, maybe from my mum being ill and dying, and then not getting on with the stepmother that I had. There was just no trust there at all. And yet they've become my saving grace, my power, part of my power. The women that I'm surrounded by are warrior women. The women that are in the action, that are doing the steps, that are helping others, that are in service, is just relationships that I never thought I'd have. And to be sat here, 23 and a bit years clean, still buzzing from what we do here. You know, all of us here in this meeting, we've found a way out. And you've got your first convention coming. It's just, it's growing and growing and growing. You know, like I said, when I first came to Bournemouth for treatment, there was 2 CA meetings. They were absolute chaos. It was all about the trainers, and it was very gangster, very plastic gangster maybe. Maybe 1 or 2 real ones in the rooms, and now I don't even know how many meetings there are in the area now. And when I came back from my meetings, there was 7, between 5 and 7, and every single person in every single meeting was talking about sponsorship, service, and waving big books around. It was on fire. And that's where I recovered. It was just incredible to see. I was out using it about 18, 19 months. And to come back and see the change was just mind-blowing. And seeing people that I'd hung out with before, their lives had catapulted forward. You know, they had jobs, they were productive. I have to admit, you know, if I'm honest, I expected them to hang around till I got back in. I was a bit kind of miffed that they were busy working and not waiting to carry me back and through the doors and carry me in my recovery. But, you know, of course not. That's not what we do. You know, we come in, we get on with it, we get a sponsor, we're honest as we can be on any given day. And my honesty's changed over the years. You know, I'm able to be more honest now than I've ever been able to be. I'm able to communicate more honestly. The fear doesn't cripple me. Oh, what am I going to lose if I'm honest with this person? You know, and I'm more able to be honest about who I am, what I've done. You know, I'm not afraid anymore. And that's an incredible place to be. I don't know how much longer I've got left. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's new here. Get yourself a sponsor. Put your own thinking to one side and your own ideas to one side, because if you're anything like me when you came in, you don't have a clue you might have a clue about how to score a bit of crack or how to sell a bit of crack, but you haven't got a clue on how to recover. Get yourself a sponsor and work through these steps. And then you'll have a clue on how to recover and be able to help other people and be consistent. I've got a friend on here, I think, and I kept saying it's about consistency. It's about taking the action consistently. Because when life shows up, which inevitably does, you're going to need to have been consistent. It's easy, isn't it? It's easy to work this stuff when life's going good. But, you know, when the chips have been down and my back's been against the wall, I've been so grateful that the action has been consistent action, that I wasn't dependent on my partner or my ex-husband staying sober. My recovery did not depend on that. And when I came back this time, I said to myself, I'm not going to let anything or anyone get in the way of my recovery. And that stands true today. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. I can feel power running through me when I say that. Nothing is going to take that from me. The only person that can take that from me is me. And I can do that by stopping what we do here. You know, I don't need to come to meetings anymore to hear a message. I come to carry the message. You know, I know the message is work the 12 steps. Maybe that's not strictly true, because when I was 15 years in and that woman shared, I did need to hear it. But I needed to hear her experience of where she'd been in long-term recovery. And that's what I hear, that stuff in the rooms. And when I hear newcomers and I watch newcomers, the biggest gift I've been given is to see the lights coming on and people getting well. That's the biggest gift I get here, and I get to witness that. And it really brings joy to my heart. And when I came in here, I felt nothing. I was numb. I didn't even know what I liked and what I didn't like. I was absolutely broken and battered. And that's exactly where I needed to be in order to be able to take on someone else's ideas. I never listened as a kid. I never listened to my dad or my stepmom or teachers, anyone in authority. I had absolutely zero respect for anybody. And I'm really grateful now that, you know, I've got that one person in my life that's got my back, that can tell me about myself, that you know, can suggest going through the steps again, to keep peeling away the layers and to become authentic, and to have got that. You know, I came in here just thinking, when I saw the word God on the walls, I wasn't down there with that. I came in with a very childish attitude that if there was a God, my mum wouldn't have died. And my first sponsor said, God doesn't help. God doesn't make those things happen. God helps you get through those things. And that was kind of the beginning that I needed. You know, I still don't really know what my concept is, but all I know is that's my go-to connection. It's not, you know, if I'm struggling or when I'm struggling, in good times, in bad times, that has grown. And I can remember someone saying to me, why are you working the 12 steps? This was when I first came in. And my answer was, because I want to stay clean. And he said, no, you're working these 12 steps to get a connection with God. And I said, don't confuse me. I'm just here to stay clean. I don't, you know, and that's absolutely what I've been given. And that's as a result of working through all the steps, and telling, you know, being honest. You know, whether it's God, the universe, whoever you choose it to be, and thank God we can choose. You know, that God knows what I've been up to. The universe sees what I've been up to. My conscience knows what I've been up to. But I can be very, very choosy about what I share. And that's not safe for me. You know, I have to be open and honest with at least one person. And I have got my group of people. Like I said, you know, that I don't go to everyone in the rooms, but I've got my circle, and my circle continues to grow, you know. It's and I find that by continuing to go to meetings and doing what I need to do in order to recover, by helping others, by being of service, doing the whole deal. And yeah, that's come through the consistent action that is outlined in these steps. It's very, very clear what we need to do. And it's only my mind that can get in the way, my mind that continues to lie, that likes shiny things, that can distract me, you know. And I've got a good life. I've got 3 amazing children. They're all doing their thing. You know, 2 of them have been brought up in recovery, and they know about recovery. Rightly or wrongly, I wasn't one of those parents that hid it from them, and that's my decision. That's my choice, and that was right for me. I'm not saying what's right for other people at all, but they know where they can go when and if they get into trouble. And my middle daughter, she drinks a lot, and she said to me she said it a few times, "Mum, if I'm still doing this when I'm 25, you've got permission to take me to a meeting." And I said to her, we need that in writing. I was on video call to them, and my son said, I said, in fact, I've heard it on video call, and my son was there to witness it. And he said, no, she said, I'll send you a video note saying you can do that. And my son said, you'll just say that it's AI, which he probably would, because no one was going to bring me into these rooms. Doesn't matter how much I tell people they need to be doing this, that, and the other. Until I was ready, it wasn't going to happen. Until I had that internal snap where I was totally broken and beaten by active addiction, I wasn't going to come here. And I can tell you now, there was nothing worse than having had treatment and knowing the harm that I could cause, because I didn't really know before. I thought I was just harming myself, and that didn't really matter. And then knowing you guys had a way out, and I'd turned my back on it because I'd separated myself and told myself I was not like you. My case was different. And, I'm very lucky to have survived that, because that relapse took me into lying in a hospital bed with sepsis, being told that if I hadn't got to hospital when I did, I wouldn't have survived another 3 days. And that's when I knew that this disease would kill me. And my life is incredible. I've brought up 3 kids. I've worked. I'm able to be of service. And one of my biggest worries was I love to dance. I'm so free when I'm dancing. I dance like no one's watching. The world disappears. And I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to dance without drink or drugs. And that hasn't been the case. And I will keep dancing till I can't dance any longer. So yeah, like I said, if you're new or you're even years in and you're struggling, have a new experience, because it lit me up again. And I can look back now and think, thank God I didn't go and have a bomb with my kids, because I would never have experienced the next level of freedom that I got. You know, and I really believe that I have been guided by something throughout my whole recovery, because I've just been open enough and humble enough. You know, it's very easy for my ego to reassert itself and think I'm right. I can be very, very self-righteous. But it doesn't serve me, and I'm truly, truly grateful that I've had enough humility, a day at a time, to stay here and keep plodding on. even when I want to throw my arms up in the air and scream, I've had enough. You know, it passes, doesn't it? The people, you know, people in here that have been around a little while know that the difficult times pass. And I come out the other side and I think, oh, that's why. You know, had my marriage not broken down, I wouldn't be the woman I am today. I wouldn't be with the partner I'm with today, where the love is real and I can communicate honestly and openly, and I can say exactly how I feel without fear of being ridiculed or any repercussions or being punished in any way. You know, I can walk this path alongside others, and I can help others along this path with the experience that I've had in these rooms. And it's got so much value for me. And I just wouldn't have had that experience had I not gone through the steps, had I not swallowed my pride and gone through the work again and again and again. And I think I'm going to leave it there. It's been a huge, huge privilege to be on this Zoom meeting, to be sharing on the lead up to the first convention in Belgium. And I really hope that somebody's got something from what I've shared today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicky. See, that was